We'll just kick it off. All right. Okay, thanks for coming. It's all about VH-MDX, which is a missing aircraft since 1981, August 1981, and it had 5 people on board. And we run an exercise every year to attempt to locate that aircraft and the missing persons. And we also do quite a number of recce trips, reconnaissance trips, and this year we also had another major exercise, a mentoring exercise, which is quite large, reasonably large. And basically what we're trying to do is not only locate the aircraft, but also develop and test our remote land SAR capability. As I said, we're a member of the VRA. So first part, we'll keep it fairly basic so we can get some questions and you know, answer anything you want within reason about Barrington and MDX. We'll split it into 2 parts. Part 1 is just an overview about the SAREX, the search and rescue exercise. And then part 2, we'll go over a quick research overview. It won't be in depth as usual. We'll keep it fluid and we'll give you a basic overview of what's happened, where we're at, and then you guys can ask questions if you like or not. So I've touched on the what the Barrington SAREX is. It's a multi-agency exercise. We run it at BSAR, but we encourage multi-agency participation. And the reason for that is we're developing and testing our own remote land SAR capability, but we're also feeding a bit of information and experience out to other agencies. So we're trying to pass on that to develop a stronger New South Wales remote land SAR capability. And as you'll find out, transport will also be tested. So that's an integral part of remote land SAR. And we'll have agencies like Police Rescue and Bomb Disposal Unit, they'll use it for training. So you'll see them out there doing a bit of navigation practice. They'll also do ATV, or trained vehicle practice. New South Wales Ambulance SOTIs, a special operations team, they're excellent. They give us support and emergency reaction capability. So we have someone go down, they're in there very quick. We had a snake bite there a couple of years ago and they were in there in a flash, so they're excellent. They'll normally be accompanied by a BSAR member to navigate and get them in there, if we can, that is, if we have the resources. But they're excellent. However, this year we have engaged them more heavily in scenario work. So in the last exercise we had, I'd given freedom to the team leaders to spring up scenarios, medical scenarios as they felt, when they felt. And that tested us at the command post, so we didn't know when it was going to happen. We also gave the SOT teams the ability to do that, and so we sometimes had multiple scenarios at once, but we also sprung it on them. And it's not one of these things where you're trying to catch someone out, it's just we want that shock factor and see how people react, and then we go down and debrief, do it again next day, let's see how we go. And you do see the improvement. So New South Wales Ambulance SOT have been excellent. Again, in those 2 areas, and you'll only see more closer relationships in BSAR, I would say, and particularly in scenario work this year. So the Barrington SAREX, yep, we're looking for VH-MDX and the 5 occupants, but you can see already that we're getting a lot out of it, and we really do. Okay, we're really pushing technology, pushing our members, pushing other agencies, and we're developing a strong remote land SAR capability. It really is good. Yeah. That's the weather as of a few hours ago, forecast for the SAREX. So not too bad, it'll be quite warm, except at the night time. Okay. It might even duck under those minimum temperatures that it usually does. Chance of rain is minimal. There is a northwesterly wind to westerly. That could be problematic, the northwesterly, because we're on a north-facing area in a bushfire zone with trees that are ready to fall. So we do need to monitor that. So rain, snow, all that sort of stuff doesn't bother us. I did get asked by another agency, when it rains, is that it? You call it off? No, not really. The biggest threat to us is wind. Wind is a problem because even not in a bushfire area, affected area, we still have this issue of branches falling down. Yeah. And there's some big ones that fall down. But at this stage, you know, 20 kilometres an hour ain't too bad. Okay, and it's tending to be westerly more than northwesterly. So we should have good conditions. If it does rain, that will affect forward drive access, and I'll discuss that with you at the SAREX. We always put this up because VH-MDX is a very highly political talking point. So those 3 points there are what we're all about at BSA New South Wales. So we're just there to complete the original mission. We're not interested in legal, self-interest or political based activities, which there are a lot of with this aircraft, with this event. And we're out there to spread accurate information regarding the accident. So we are leading the research effort for this. We've really kicked that in the guts pretty heavily. And we want to get the right information out there, because there is just a lot of stories and a lot of rubbish out there, and we'd like to set that straight as much as we can. So we're really there ultimately to offer closure to the families, okay, and friends that were closely involved with this event. Okay, where are we searching this year? So this was last year. That was during the SAREX itself. You can see that is rather challenging. This is on a recce trip with me taking the photo with Jeff Mallison probably 1.5 meters ahead of me. Okay. So we do have problems with effective searching, slows us down. However, this year it is a lot better. So that is the effect of bushfire, okay? December last year, there is regrowth, however, you're not seeing a lot of those challenging areas that you just saw. It's nice and open, okay? It's only the egress out, if you're going down the hill, that will close in. But other than that, this sort of topography, this sort of vegetation, very steep, you can see, okay? Where the inclinometer out there last weekend, it's 55 degrees in some of the sections. It was basically tree to tree. You couldn't, but it was relatively fast searching because the vegetation was clear. So that's what we're doing this year. So the bushfire was in 2016, December. So now it's starting to grow back, so we need to hurry up and get in there. So it's too good an opportunity to miss. We can put all our resources in there and give it a real good hit, okay? And we should substantially cover that area with contact search teams. We've also got another area closer to base for slower teams, okay? And we've done it so they can ingress the search area easily, just jump out of a vehicle and go downhill. It's steep, and there's vegetation that's closed in, but they get to go down and they exit downhill, and the exit area isn't overly long-winded. Like I said, up in these areas here, might take you 2 hours to get out there, half an hour. Even for a slow, if they go really slow, it might take them an hour. We can get the soddies in there quickly as well, if anything happens, and it's closer to base, right? We've got a helicopter landing site nearby as well, potential one. So it's all set up so that we can cater for everyone, okay? Out of interest, that's where the search area is. This purple boundary is the primary search area this year, where the bushfire affected zone is, and in here. And these two circles are our current most probable area for where the aircraft was at 6,500 feet and where it faded from radar. It's only a best guess, yeah? But you can see that there's a good spillover in there, okay? And as I'll show you later, the aircraft could be over here or over here. This is just our best guess. We can see, in theory, we're pretty close to the radar fade area. Yeah. Martin?
So where your red arrow is pointing,
yeah.
So the one on the left is most probable area, and the one on the right is radar fade, or the other way?
The whole thing is the most probable area, but this is the 6,500 foot altitude where the aircraft was at 6,500 feet. Okay, that's where we think it faded from radar, and if it continued on, that's where it was at 5,000 feet, and that's where it impacted 30 seconds later.
Got it.
It's only a straight line variant. The aircraft could have gone, yeah, either way, north, south, but based on its final radar track, that's sort of where it's headed to. Okay, but you've got to keep a very open mind about this. Okay, very, very open mind actually. So these areas are probably more accurate than that. So These ones here, where the aircraft was at 6.5 and at radar fade, are more likely to be closer to where it actually was at those parameters than those ones. They're going to be out. They're going to be out. That answer it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So yeah, we're in accordance with this statistical model that we're running. So we're running, Glenn Horrocks has developed software, one of our members, to look at it statistically rather than a simple plot. Okay, that's why there's these 3 different colours. Yeah, that's for that current search area in 2017 is falling into the, quite a nice area. Okay. Search tactics, we're going to use contact searching with creeping line ahead, which means basically 3 to 5 person teams. They will move that way, then they'll get to here and reverse it, and they'll be attempting to look at the other person's feet to ensure that everything is searched in between. Yeah? So that'll be our search tactics this year, which goes against what I said last year, because what we've been doing is doing reconnaissance type contour searching. So we'll have a 3-person team only, and I'll do here, then I'll go down and do this section and that section, because our search area is so wide, it's massive. Okay, and it's unlikely that that'll ever come down with any confidence. Okay, 100 square k's or so, big in this sort of terrain and vegetation. So that's what we like doing, but because we've got this burnt area, now we just want to get in there while it's burnt and just clear it out. In fact, in my opinion, I think that doing this and focusing on one area will decrease our chances of finding the aircraft, because given this large area of probability, focusing on one area is, in my view, not the way to go strategically. Right? I think we need to put our fingers through the whole area, right, in a more sparse way. I think you've got a better chance of finding the aircraft. So I actually think that this decreases our chance of it. However, how often do you get a whole area burnt out this big? Very rare. So we just need to hit it, get it done, and then we'll move back to those tactics next year.
Harder to find the small pieces of cardboard and perspex and stuff that we were finding otherwise.
Maybe.
Probably covered in ash and God knows what.
But there's always going to be a bit of aluminium, isn't there?
That's probably only going to be one jumbled heap somewhere.
Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I'm not prepared to say either way. Like,
I think the likelihood is that
maybe
you won't find debris trail quite so easily.
Yeah, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. We need to try. And again, that's why we need to contact search. Okay? If we contact search, then we've hit it hard. If it's there, we'll find it. Okay? All right. So if the plastic's burnt downhill, say it did, say all the interior went, then if we're contact searching the whole area, then we'll find the wing or the substantial wreckage or the engine block, right, which won't easily melt. The aluminium might, but even that, it's very hard to say either way. But we're contact searching anyway. We're not. If we were to do this in that area, then yeah, that's the problem. That is a problem, absolutely. So anyway, so we need to just contact search it, get rid of it, and then we move back to our standard tactics. Just out of interest, a lot of this is one of the only areas that actually is affected by bushfire infrequently as well, and these north side ridge lines. Everywhere else we go further in.
I'll probably start one for next year.
Yeah, I've already asked NPWS and I don't want to do that. so yeah, it's there's areas there that have never and never will be affected by bushfire. So this is just one of those ones that, right, let's do it. Mapping. So these are we'll talk about LiDAR maps first. So basically maps that were made by our BSAR member Glenn Horrocks, very smart guy, engineer. LiDAR is used as basically a laser on an aircraft. It's used to fire down at the surface for mapping. So it's done by a government agency or actually private companies these days as well. And what it does, it can penetrate the tree canopy, believe it or not, this laser. Not on every hit, but it can actually do it on every hit so often. And what it can do is give us a very good appreciation of where the canopy height is. So to look at multiple reflections. First reflection is quite accurate, and that'll be the top of the tree canopy, top. And then the second one is not so accurate because it's a bit funny about where it could be, same as the third one. But the last one is accurate, and that's the ground level. And it can actually determine this and this quite accurately. And what you can do with this data is what Glenn Horrocks has done, is extract it, because you get all these Z values, or altitude or height values, and you can say, well, okay, there's lots of this one. That means there's not many trees, right? There's lots of this one, so it's a forest. It's high, with a high canopy. Oh, you've got a lot around this level here. That means it's very scrubby underneath. Okay, from that, you can make a vegetation density map, and we'll explain that in a minute. Very, very good for our operations. Not only that, the contours are very accurate. Okay, so with the old method of generating topographic maps, it's effectively done from aerial photography. Okay, there's other multispectral cameras and so forth these days, but ultimately it's just from a photo. Yeah? So we now have, with this method, an ability to actually see where the floor of the forest is. So now, all of a sudden, we have these contours that are uber accurate, very accurate, very accurate. And for us, that's massive, because we've walked in there with standard topographics. When I first joined this in 2014, we'd go in there and we'd blame each other on hang on, you're taking me down the gully, mate. You're going the wrong way. And because there'd be significant gullies, significant knolls, spur lines there, and you go, where is this? It's not on the map. Now we know where they are. We do. They're there. So you can see here, we've overlaid this, and this is the way it'll be in the Oregon 600s for the SAREX. See these contour lines here, these straight, thin ones? That's actually from a standard topographic map, okay? Where it says 750 and these thin lines. That's a standard topo contour. Have a look at this. Look at the LiDAR contours. Look at this gully here. And it's significant. That is a huge gully, yet the contour lines are straight. Yeah? So knowing that is massive. Okay. Not only that, it gives us the position of cliffs and rock faces. Those black things there, cliffs and rocks. So now we know, before we go in, what do we need to take? Don't bother taking a rope, or take a hand line or whatever. Or when we get there, we'll search from underneath and we won't, you know what I mean? Because a lot of the times we'd go in, we'd hit these things and go, oh, we're here now, and we'd find a way around it. But now we can plan for it ahead. Really good. But can you see those contour lines? Can you see this gully here that's not there on the standard topo? Amazing, yeah? We've also overlaid these red lines. These are the search tracks from previous searches, the GNSS tracks from previous searches. So now we can go in and dress off, okay, previous searches. This is a recce term, so forget that. But you'll see, patterned, organised lines going through, and that's where teams have gone through.
Just a 10-second explanation as to what a GNSS is.
Global Navigation Satellite System, otherwise known as GPS. Or that's one form of it, yeah. GPS is one form of GNSS. Because we've got GLONASS, the Russian system, Galileo, European, Bidou, whatever it is, the Chinese. So, yeah. So actually, as time goes on, you'll see multiple GNSS in one ship. I think they released one last year. It had all four systems in it. And commonly you'll see GLONASS and GPS together. That's just almost standard these days. But you'll see Galileo soon thrown in there as a trifecta. Anyway, so the LiDAR maps are excellent. I've talked about the overlay of the previous GNSS search tracks. Okay. But there are issues, okay? As you can see here, the thin lines represent the standard topographic contours, but the LiDAR ones are completely out. Okay, it's pretty obvious that it's out too, all right? And it's whitewashed and with a big black cliff line that doesn't exist. And the reason for that is that we have the data that we've obtained under the license is subject to these errors. Okay, that's why it wasn't released public. Okay, so we have a test and development license. Okay, contract. So we're here doing test and development at our own risk and so forth and blah blah. So the laser head that they were trialling could not handle large elevation changes. Okay, so you'll see near the Gloucester tops themselves, there's inaccuracies, but everywhere else it's quite good. In fact, I think it was just the Gloucester tops themselves that had the issue. Oh well, can't use it there, so then we'll go back to our topo charts. Bad luck, yeah. But for the egress out, you've still got all that data, so it's great news still. The other thing was that I think it had a, there was an error in an elevation error of something ridiculous, like 300 millimeters. So it was rejected for that as well, but good for us. Doesn't make any difference for us. But we need to be aware of these errors, and that's the one I think, is this what you see? Yeah, so this is all known, it's not a problem. We'll just go to standard topos there, and hopefully one day...
On the edges of the maps you did too, the edge of the tile, some of them there.
Is there? On which side?
Right on the edge of the tile is pretty funny in places.
Okay, we'll have a look at that. So they're obvious. Okay. Then
we're not going to be searching off the edge of a tile. We're going to be basically in the tile, so
yeah,
it's not a real issue.
Hopefully in the future that they'll rerun the area again and we'll get better data. But this is pretty damn good for now. Very good actually. In fact, we'll probably change it over to Landsat ultimately if we can get data for the Blue Mountains and so forth. What we're aiming to do is develop the techniques and so forth and standards and then publish it so that we can, you know, for all to use for Landsat. It's standard orienteering map format, by the way. It's orienteering standards that the maps are using, okay? And they specify these various vegetation levels and symbology. Lots of green means you're going to be cutting with secateurs. A little bit of green, you'll be doing a lot of that and maybe some secateurs, snipping your way out of it. If it's just white, that means it's forest with a big canopy, but open on the bottom. So you can actually run almost through those areas. So you're under big tree canopy, but you can bolt, okay? Whereas you can't do that in the green areas. The green areas means there is stuff at this level. I can't remember what the parameter was. Might have been about 1.5 meters from memory or 1.8 or something like that. So that's and it's very accurate. We've found it to be very accurate. The browny shade areas, open grassland, okay? So you can see already that if a team was coming down through here, would you want to, if you had the option, that's the other question, would you exit down through here or would you exit up here? You know, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? And it is very accurate. To the point where Phil and I, when we went, we could actually spot, we were going down a creek line, and we knew when a vegetation patch was coming up ahead. We just knew it was coming, so we'd get ready for it. And either we'd go up the hill a little bit and come back down the other side, have a look, or get the secateurs out and start clipping away. So you can prepare yourself. Excellent tool. Black cliff lines here, yeah. And there's also, not shown on here, purple, shaded purple with a black boundary, and that's for man-made objects, okay? And what we've detected, and I probably should have put that up there, is the caravan park, for instance, up there. You can see the caravans, right? And you can actually see the vegetation around their plants and everything. It's amazing, yeah? So as a potential tool, this didn't start off, this whole LiDAR project did not start off for this outcome. This is a byproduct, okay? We started off to actually attempt to detect MDX. Okay. So last year we had Rob and a number of others looking at the raw data, at the reflectivity, and I think it drove everyone nuts. Just spots of reflectivity, and we were good at finding rocks and boulders. But we're hoping still to be able to detect MDX with it. It's just how do we eliminate the false positives, of which there are many. Okay. So there's a lot of purple man-made objects indicated on these maps, and they're tending to be big boulders, right, which is expected. You know? So it's got a long way to go in that regard for detecting the aircraft, but the byproduct is probably even better in one way. It's just an amazing tool. It is just cool. It's cool stuff. So, and again, you can see here, straight contours, yet the LiDAR ones are bent, showing a gully. It's just excellent. There's also brown dots which indicate a knoll. Okay, I can't remember the parameters, but I think it needs to be a certain slope within 5 metres. So that also could be MDX as well. Yeah, brown knoll. It's in the search orders, Annex J. Did everyone get them?
Yes.
So for you guys, not as applicable as transport, but have a look at it. You know, it could mean something for you. If you're track clearing or something, you can see where the patches are. Remembering, of course, that the data was taken, I think, around 2015 from memory. I'd have to check that. But the bushfire area that we are operating in, obviously that vegetation, it ain't like that anymore. Okay. So, excellent planning tool strategically from here in Sydney. Before we even go up, we know what's going on. Tactically, for the guy in the field, and look and go, how do I get out? How do I get around this? What's up ahead? Oh, there's a purple object, a man-made object or a knoll. I better go check that out. Could be the aircraft. That sort of stuff. Really, really good. We also have tailored topographic maps. So this is where the coverage, if the LiDAR coverage is bad, as we've seen in that Gloucester Tops area, or if you can't handle the excessive detail of the LiDAR maps, because as soon as you zoom out, the LiDAR maps are too busy, way, way too busy. Then we've got this one loaded in the Oregon 600s as well. It has the GNSS tracks previous. It also has the SA boundaries, search area boundaries, and it also has the task area boundaries. So for those that are not aware, it is in the search orders, okay? And transport probably need to know this too, because you'll be picking up people in accordance with the search orders, search areas we specify. So we have this purple boundaries, and we call these search areas. They're bigger areas. For instance, there's SA Rumble. Okay, there's I think SA Bigfoot. They got silly names basically. That, you know, there's Yowie sightings up there, so we've got Bigfoot and a whole bunch of others. And some of these are broken down, so that way we can say we're operating in search area Rumble. We need you to drop people off on the northern side of it, bang, or southern side, bang. You know exactly, roughly where it is. Sorry. And then some search areas, some SAs are broken down into task areas. So we use the natural geographic features to say, let's break it down into more manageable chunks. And then we'll call it TA1, TA2, 3, and again here, TA1 of Bigfoot, TA1 of Rumble. So that breaks it into chunks. So that's normally the case, not always. Sometimes we just say operate here between these grids and whatever. If it's just we're throwing a team in, but if we're doing a major operation and then like this particular exercise, you'll see that it's broken down into task areas. Yeah. Okay. And this other tailored topographical will show you that, and it uses standard topographic information, so it's just whatever's available in standard format. None of this LiDAR stuff. And I do need to mention also, just going back to the LiDAR, it's only works from 120 metre scale and below. So you guys know, 120 and below. So if you zoom out to 200 metres, which I think is the next one, you won't see them. Okay, there's just too much detail, and the tiling system won't click. So that's actually in the search orders as well, but it's an important point to remember. And in fact, you probably don't want to look at it above 120 metres. It's just too busy. It really is that focused in type map. Yeah. So remember 120 metres and below. And there's no search area or TAs on the LiDAR map, just so you know. Cool. There's also instructions how to use the LiDAR maps in that annex in the search orders. There's five LiDAR maps, of which you'll probably only use 3. Some will only use 1. And the LiDAR maps are so detailed that they had to be broken down into these 5 maps. There's been issues. We're really pushing our GNSS units, our Oregons. They're only a few years old, but they're already outdated. We've outdated them in a space of 12 months. We've just pushed them to the max, and we're going to keep pushing technology. So they're struggling to keep up, but they're working well. You'll see this. There's Gloucester northwest, Gloucester northeast. You'll see this in the units themselves. Gloucester southwest, Gloucester, south east. There's also one called join, because there was a thin band of non-coverage area here, is the way the data was extracted, and the quickest solution we could come up with to fix it was to have the 5th map to do it. Okay, we might do a rerun next year, we might not, it might not be worth it. It works, you know. So this search, generally you'll see us using these 3. If you're operating out to the west of the main area, then you'll only be probably using that one. If you're operating only to the east, you'll probably only that one. Switch off the ones that you don't need, and that's all in the instructions in the search orders in the annex. So best not to have this one running and this one running. Okay, you just pick what you need, just switch on the ones you need. However, leave the Oz Topo maps on, okay, and leave the Garmin maps on. There'll be Garmin roads, Garmin whatever, there's a whole bunch of them. When you go in the menu, there's the main menu, have all those maps on, including Oz Topos. Then you go into custom maps. The custom maps are the ones that you turn on and off. And the reason for that is, with the Oz Topo and the Garmin maps, you're actually filling in detail for the LiDAR map. So, going backwards, if we didn't have the Oz Topo on here, you wouldn't see any of these contour markings, okay? You also won't see Gloucester River, Kerriput River, all these other names, they disappear. Gloucester Tops Road disappears, the road and the label. We decided that there's no point trying to spend all the time to try and add all these features on the LiDAR map when we can just turn on the Oz Topo and the Garmin's and overlay it simultaneously. The draw order is such that you can see it's not that bad, okay? It overlays nicely. Yeah, but just turn the custom maps off that you don't need. Don't run LiDAR maps that you're not using. Don't run the tailored topographical if you're not using it. So as I said, tailored topographical, going back to that, I had the search areas purple, task areas in yellow, okay, which I previously drew. There's variation lines on it as well. See this red line here? It's just your magnetic variation if you're wondering what that is. Someone did ask, is that pointing towards where the aircraft is? No, it's not. Okay. And it hasn't overlaid the previous GNSS tracks, as you can see there. Okay, a lot clearer in the flesh. Yeah.
These maps don't have that thing that Jeff drew on them?
No, they don't. So mapping waypoints. What we've done is we have put the relay points or repeaters as a waypoint, and we've put in the helicopter landing sites, potential helicopter landing sites. It'll be up to the ambulance soddies or the SCAT team, SCAT member to determine whether you get winched out straight out of the bush or whether they need to run people down there. We put them in as waypoints so that way you can actually go to. So you can say, go to, bang. Go to the RP. Why would you go to the RP? It's transport, you might, because you might drop off some supplies. You might just go check on their welfare. You might go there to actually to wait for other teams to egress.
And just a short explanation what an RP is?
I just said it, yeah, a relay point at the beginning. Yep. So a relay point, it's just a radio, a couple of dudes, Wyson dudes there, operating radios. And most of them will be camp out positions, just so you know. They'll be camping out there, okay, not returning to base. Okay. Helicopter landing sites there as well, potential ones. So you can just put it, bang it into your GNSS and off you go. There's a question actually, are you guys bringing your own, or what's the story there? GPS drivers here.
Yeah, you've got about 1,000 of them, don't you?
So I've got an Oregon, and I've got phone-based ones that are pretty good. But
Okay.
I'm not going to have those maps on them. I've got an Oregon though.
I'll send you the maps. Okay. So I'll just grab your email address. I think I have it, but I'll just grab it. And can you share it? What about you?
Yeah, I've got a Garmin as well. I think same as the one that you're using downstairs.
Okay. What we'll do is I'll forward them to you. You have a crack at putting them in. If it doesn't work out, we'll sort it out at the CP. You're getting there on
Thursday afternoon, night. Yeah.
Thursday afternoon.
Okay. So what we'll do, Rob, you're getting there and.
When I get there.
Okay. So when he gets there, I'll probably be too busy. I'll try to assist you if I can, but Rob or someone else will be able to assist you.
The transport, is it as important for the transport people to have it?
I think you should have it
I mean, I was
because
nearly sure.
yeah, I think as a minimum you should have the we're not worried about the LiDAR here, I'll just clarify that.
Oh, okay, right.
Just the waypoints,
Yeah.
you'll need them, okay, because you will navigate to them.
Yeah, they're just a GPX file that you can download.
Oh, I can
Simple.
yeah, I mean, like GPX files, the normal stuff, I can do it on the phone, I've got decent software on that. I've got my Oregon, but to be honest, I haven't used it for about 2 years, but I'll let it go.
Yep, and we'll give you the, that tailored topographical KMZ. So it's just a drag and drop into custom maps. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And if it's an older unit, it won't handle it. So I don't know what you've got, Ricky, but we'll sort it out, okay? But definitely the waypoints. And do you have topographic maps on your, like OzTopo or something similar?
Yeah. No, I've got all that.
Yeah.
So that's easy. It's GPX file, absolutely no.
It doesn't matter because you'll have a map as well. We'll provide all the mapping as well, the water-resistant maps.
Yeah.
So we'll give you that, but it's always good to have a GNSS running. So the waypoints, as we said, HLSs and radio relay points and repeaters, which you will more than likely visit as transport. And for field members, then obviously you're egressing that way, or you need to know where the radio repeater is when you're in the field and you're losing coverage, so that's why you have that. And for HLS, obvious reasons, emergencies.
Waterproof map.
Yep, so we'll provide all that. It'll have everything you need on it.
Back.
I need that.
Except the location of the MDX.
So
That's a good.
we can, as I said, we can use them easily to go to. Okay, nice and simple. Okay, that's it for that. Part 2, research. So I take it for you guys, it's new, this whole MDX thing? Yeah. Do you know much about it? Or?
I've read the notes, but apart from that.
Okay. Well, it was a single engine light aircraft. Okay. As you can see, that's a photo of it. And it was a 6-seater with 5 people on it. It was travelling from Proserpine in Queensland to Bankstown in Sydney, obviously. And you can imagine that's quite a long way. Two sectors, so it did need a refuel at Coolangatta. But you could go Coolangatta to Sydney quite comfortably. The 210 is actually, Cessna 210, the type of aircraft, is quite a slick little light aircraft. It does hoot along, and it does have good legs on it. They were just returning from it was a private flight, they were returning from a boat trip, a coastal passage in a yacht, owned by the yacht was owned by the aircraft owner as well. So they basically just wanted to position the boat up to Proserpine or Shute Harbour, and then it was going to be based there for a few months, having fun on the Barrier Reef and so forth. And these guys had an opportunity to, make the coastal passage in the boat. Great fun. And the flight back was literally send the aircraft up, take them back home. 9th of August 81, as I said. There were 5 people on board, and it disappeared without a trace. And literally, there is no trace, not even one spot of wreckage found. Okay. And as we'll go into it, we'll see why it has probably disappeared without a trace. And it did disappear within or near the Barrington Wilderness area. And I always say that because you don't know. It could be just slightly out of the BWA, or it could be it's an unknown. And I need to update that. BSAR New South Wales, which used to be known as Bushwalkers Wilderness Rescue Squad until this year, wasn't it? And then it was known as BSNR beforehand, so we've gone through a few name changes. Bushwalker Search and Rescue were involved straight away from the first surge. So BSAR New South Wales basically had that strong remote area capability, always has. That's what was set up, and they hit the wilderness area hard. They got in there and did their best, and we've been searching for it ever since, almost yearly, not quite. Just a general map, just to give you a general appreciation of what's going on. So you can see coastline, we have Newcastle down here. We go north and we have Taree, okay, Foster. Inland we have the Barrington top tier, where this high terrain is. Singleton down here, okay. And the plan was to go from Port Macquarie, Taree to Craven Waypoint. Okay, and all that is there's a town called Craven here, down here, nearby, maybe 10 kilometres away. It is not Craven that it was flight plan to, not Craven Township, it was flight plan to, and I need to always say this because people still get it confused. It went to this waypoint called Craven. It's an imaginary position in the air. There's nothing underneath it except trees, okay? And it's just the intersection of two radio navigation aids that defines it. Sort of like you going out and saying, there's a mountain peak there, I've identified that, I'm taking a bearing off that, now I'll take a bearing off that mountain peak over there, resection basically, and where they cross, those bearings cross is where you are. Okay, so you can imagine that it could be quite wide a fix. Okay, the likeliness of the aircraft ever going across that, even when everything's going correctly, is very slim. And Department of Transport knew that back then. We know that now. That we know that yeah, you're going to be somewhere in that area, but not specifically right over that point most of the time. So it was flight plan from Taree to Craven, and then down to Singleton, non-directional beacon, basically a beacon that you could track to, which is a little bit further away from Singleton Township. Okay, and that was normal procedure to avoid the RAF Williamtown military airspace. Okay, so everyone needs their airspace, right? And that was the flight plan. However, there was always the option of going directly coastal to Williamtown. Okay, another aircraft, I think it was 6 minutes ahead from memory, sailed through there. You just asked for it and you got it. Okay, and then from there, he could have gone inland from Newcastle and sailed through and avoided the Barrington tops. For whatever reason, the pilot elected to go inland. Okay, sorry, to continue to Craven. I believe that he did, and many other researchers believe that he did initially start tracking to Williamtown NDB, or overhead Williamtown. But when the clearance from Sydney wasn't forthcoming, we believe that he probably turned somewhere in this town of Nadiac, somewhere around there, but we'll never know. So there's no radar identification or anything there. And then he's turned inland to hunt down this Craven waypoint. Okay, but MDX has ended up at the initial fix with the red pin is up the top there. Okay. How it got there, we don't know. It could be many reasons. Right.
So that red pin, that signifies what?
That's where Sydney Air Traffic Control actually identified VH-MDX on radar. Why did they do that? Because he started running into cloud and into problems with instruments that were malfunctioning. So he was directed to put a certain code in his transponder, which talks to the ground radar. And they knew he was in a bit of trouble, so they tried to look after him at that stage, and they identified him there. Sydney radar, that is, okay. So Sydney radar had two radars, one in Sydney and one at the Round Mountain up near Point Lookout. Okay, and both of those, this was probably almost halfway in between both of those radars, so right at the extremes of coverage. So you've got to consider that. And as we'll go into it, we'll see that there are other blocking factors there that results in an area that does not have very good radar coverage from Sydney ATC. Okay. But they did identify him there, and that's a fairly confident identification as well. So this aircraft somehow ended up here. There's many theories, however, no one will really ever know. Okay. There's a theory that he's incorrectly dialed in the Scone non-directional beacon instead of Singleton. They had very similar Morse idents, okay, starting with S. They also had similar frequencies, jumble around, and that's been known in the poll that resulted in an accident in the past as well. But whether that happened, who knows? Yeah. Okay. Well, we do know that the aircraft did have malfunctioning instrumentation, and that's obviously a contributing factor. But there's just speculation. People will tell you that this happened and that happened. Well, we don't know that, and we'll never know. Probably never know. Then an aircraft turns towards the south and then the east and ends up somewhere in the Barrington Tops. Okay. that arrow is a very generalistic arrow, just to show you roughly where it is, because we haven't found it yet, so we don't know where it is. So you can see it was significantly off track.
So when they identified him because of his transponder, they then told him he was not where he was supposed to be.
Correct.
And so he's correcting, that's what's happened.
Yeah. So they've said, mate, you're 40 miles north of Singleton, okay, and it was fined 36 miles, but anyway, by the by. And he's taken actions to turn to the south. They did see him a positive turn to the south. That was observed. Then there was discussion of going to West Maitland, Cessnock, down here. There it is. Discussions are going there, and there was also discussion back here of radar vectors for Bankstown. Back to here, please give me radar vectors. But he definitely turned south. There was a marked turn, and then there was a gradual turn to the east that was radar observed. Gradual turn to the east. Okay, but obviously, well, he was subject. The aircraft was subject to icing in this location around here. Then it was subject to a second bout of icing around here. Okay, so a lot of ice accumulation, and the best place is towards the coast, isn't it, to the east? And you've got to remember that people do forget. They think that when they see a map like this, he would have seen, you know, I've had all sorts of interesting comments, he would have seen that valley and he would have, I don't know, it was a pitch black night, it was in cloud, even if it was out of cloud, you can't, you don't know where you are other than someone telling you and using the beacons. And even then, as I said, it's a very coarse fix. You're only sort of in this area here, you're never hardly in there, or sorry, you're hardly ever in there. So it's not that simple. And having interviewed a few pilots that had been iced up over the Barrington tops, each one of them has just turned east. Okay, it's not to say this guy did, but obviously it appears that he has. And it's just a safe place to go. Okay, because if you can ride it out and make it out that way, then at least you can descend and let the ice melt off. Okay. Unfortunately, in this case, it appears that he could not ride out the track to the east long enough, and obviously he has a departed flight, normal flight, on the way to the coast. That's what it appears to be. So you can see quite a way off, and we'll, as I said, we'll never know why. Okay? But we're fairly confident about that fix there. Okay. There's the obvious question of why the aircraft was not found, all right? And it's a combination of things. It's not really, in my view, one or the other. The topography is as such, okay, steep, heavily vegetated. Right? So if we knew where his last radar position was very accurately, I think it would have been found by now, but I still don't think it would have been an instant find. Okay. And the reason for that is because of the radar coverage, the height above the terrain of where the last radar position would have occurred would have meant that there were so many options from that point on underneath radar coverage that it could have gone straight this way, that way. So it still would have been a challenge, okay? Even if we knew exactly where it was on radar, okay? 30 seconds before impact, we'd still have issues just simply because of the topography combined with the number of combinations of possibilities. There was no radar track recording. What I mean by that is these days everything's recorded, you know, you can rewind it. They did have a radar track recorder installed in Sydney, as I found out, and that was one big bit of research that, you know, over 3 years I've been trying to determine whether it was ever switched on, and it appears it wasn't. So it appears that actually during the time of the accident, the radar recorder was there and could be operational, okay, but it wasn't, and it appears the reason why is because it had a cadmium salt deposit on the rack. And so it was an OH&S issue, and so no one wanted to touch it, so they had to come up with a way. So we found documentation to show that it was there, but it was never used because no one wanted to touch it because they had to come up with a way of neutralising the heavy metal salts and so forth. Interesting. It was operational not long after the accident though, probably within a year at least, which is interesting. But we don't have the benefit of the track recording. Gone. There were errors in the base information and data, and I could talk all night about this, and it's really complex, it's extremely complex, but there are errors in the way the final radar fix was recorded, and that's that's not to blame the people involved at all. It's just that big organisations, in my view, are subject to interpretation errors, communication errors, Chinese whispers. And in my view, I believe I've found quite strong evidence of Chinese whispers, particularly, just so you know, the RAF Williamtown was asked to look on the radar for MDX later on as well, okay? So then they're closer, they're half the distance. So they had a look, and there was only one controller on duty, which is fine. And he was doing procedural control, okay? Which means you don't use the radar, you use time and distance, separate that way. He just, in his wisdom, which is great, decided to turn the radar on, because even though he couldn't officially use it for separation, why not have it on to assist? Mad if you don't, which was just a great move, really. And he was asked to fix and so forth, and in between the jumbles of communications between Sydney ATC, Rescue Coordination Centre, Operations Control and Williamtown, there's been clear misinterpretation of the fixes that he made. So the biggest misinterpretation has been that a radar fix attributable to Williamtown as being the fade position where the aircraft disappeared off radar, meaning he would have had to have observed it and then the intensity decrease and no more. That fix was interpreted in that way, whereas having talked to controller and gone over everything, I found that he didn't see radar fade position. He just seen one position and walked away, but that was interpreted as a fade. That fade position, what they thought was a fade position, was over the upper Williams River, okay, well out to the west of where we're searching now, probably 12 k's or so. Okay, so there's all these Chinese whispers, you know, and you still see them today, and you and I are part of it, you know. And when we run an exercise like the SAREX, Barrier to SAREX, you'll find when you look at my log, right, as things are proceeding, it's very different to the Wyson log. Okay, so things like this happen, okay, and it's up to someone to coordinate this properly and give people a kick in the butt to sort it out and to re-verify information and to do this. And that was done, but obviously this wasn't detected, so problem, yeah.
So the transponder the aircraft switched on, that will respond then to any of the radars, including Williamtown? That's like a generic...
Yeah, there's been a lot of false information out there about this with MDX. There was a suggestion, I say this almost every briefing, that the transponder code that was said could only be viewed by one radar system. No. The transponder system by its very nature is designed to respond to any radar.
Right.
So it will respond, and we're talking about microseconds, yeah? It will respond to anything. So in this case we had the Round Mountain, we had Sydney, and we had Williamtown radars. And MDX was somewhere here. So you can see that it was closer to Williamtown. Now, if all three of these radars could be within line of sight and and see MDX, they would all interrogate it, they would all get a reply, okay? This one will say, hey, what's out there? Oh, I'm here. This one will do it as well. If they were within a certain time frame, then they'd miss that particular interrogation. But that's not a problem, because a few microseconds later, okay, there'll be another. So, well, I'll take that back actually. These radars did take 12 seconds to sweep, okay? But what you've got to remember is the beam is about, I don't know, I can't remember, 2 to 2.5 degrees wide. It's not like it just sweeps through and gets one ping, it goes beep, 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 beep. Okay. So if it misses ping 1, ping 2, ping 5 and ping 6 will make up for it. All right? So if you think of it like that, all three of those, if they were within line of sight, could interrogate it. As it turns out, what we've found is that that one couldn't, whereas everyone thought this was the one that was interrogating. No one was even aware of that radar, which is very interesting. Which changes a whole bunch of things, and I'm not going to go into that unless you want to later on, but at the moment we'll just skip it. That finding does mean a lot. Anyway, so the base information data, there were errors, okay? And you know what, not too bad. Found a bunch of other aircraft up there and in vicinity of the Barrington tops. So I guess one aircraft out of many is not that bad. You've got to look at it that way, okay? Everyone makes mistakes. Okay, interpretation of the radar fixes. As I said, there's a lot of problems there. One of them being the one I mentioned, where the Williamtown fix was actually attributable as a fade position when it wasn't. Okay, it was just a position. Okay, I think that's fairly clear of that. And also the fact that there are multiple final Sydney radar positions. There's multiple ones, it's not just one. So which one do we use? Okay, I can't remember what we're up to. I think we're up to 4 in various definitions. Okay, so we've had to do our own thing to figure out which one is the most likely.
You mean multiple from about the same time?
Basically, when we're talking about, if you ask someone the question, where was your final radar fix at Sydney ATC? And from what we've found in various documents, there are at least 4 definitions of that. What you have to remember though, is we're talking about a timeline. Okay, things get jotted down. All right. A lot of this stuff goes through another person. And as I said, you even look at one of our SARXs and have a look at the logs. They can be different, okay? Different interpretations, different summaries. And they were written down at different times. Okay. So which one was the accurate one? It becomes a problem, doesn't it? Considering also that a lot of them are quite a fair distance out. But there are ways to get around that, I think, and only time will tell whether we're correct. Okay. But I think we're on the right track, I think. Just to give you an idea of what it was like, this is the Sydney radar display, the Sydney Northern Mosaic. Okay, it was a mosaic of 2 radars. The Round Mountain radar up north and Sydney RSR down south. And you can see the symbol sizes there. So I've drawn them to scale. Okay, so I've actually gone back through the manuals and I've found the symbol sizes that were set, okay, back in 1981. And I've obtained various photos of that Northern Mosaic display and I've superimposed them to scale. Okay. And what you see here is the initial position of identification. And this diamond symbol is due to the number, the code number that the pilot dialed in. Okay, full code 4000 resulted in a diamond on Sydney radar display. They also asked him to press the ident button, and the ident button is the identification button. And what that does is it sends out a special signal only for 20 seconds, which then puts a massive triangle. I mean, that's quite big. You know, you can see that, and it stands out. So that's how they identify. One method of identifying aircraft. Before the SPI, the ident triangle, they used to get aircraft to turn. Can you turn left now? And now turn right. Okay, gotcha. But hitting that button, you can maintain your course, and it's all good. And that triangle would display for about 20 seconds. Then we move down to this diamond position on its own. That's roughly, well, that's where it was reported, roughly. This is a rough position because there's a lot of issues with it, but I'm not going to go into detail, but it was somewhere around there, okay? Then, when they were handing over MDX, not handing over, when they were briefing the position of MDX to Williamtown Air Traffic Control, they said, press ident again. That's why there's another triangle here, okay? So you can see a lot of people have said, well, what if they misidentify the aircraft? But now we've seen 2 ident triangles within a logical path, time frame, distance. And they also said, we need to change the code to 3000. Okay, there's a long story to that, but I'm not going to go into that either. Code 3000 is a circle, or was a circle, on the Sydney display. Okay, that's why you see a circle now. It goes from a diamond to a circle. And then these 2 positions are not, how do I word this? This is one definition of the Sydney radar, final radar position, where this circle is, near the Gloucester tops. This is the other one. Okay. 2 different final radar positions. I've just put them there for comparison, okay? So you can see on the radar display, what do you think? I mean, is that a nice big distance to gauge track, direction and things like that? Can you imagine trying to figure out which way, particularly here when he was turning, trying to figure out with such small, relatively small movements of big symbols, which way he was headed. Not only that, there would have been clutter. Okay, more than likely would have been clutter from the weather and the terrain actually as well. So what I mean by clutter is radar returns just washing out these symbols, washing them out, so you can only see part of it. So you can see the radar controllers had a pretty challenging job. It's not that easy. They get a lot of criticism, which is unfair, because the job they had was actually quite challenging. This is not in controlled airspace, this aircraft either. And it's in a crappy radar coverage area. And on top of that, there's weather and terrain clutter.
What's the diameter of the circle there, Glenn?
Oh, from memory, I think it's 5 nautical miles.
Yeah, that's a fair one.
Yeah, don't quote me. It's in one of the research papers, but it's about 5 nautical miles. Now, keep that in mind. Oh, and this purple line is what we call the gating line. Remember I said there's 2 radars for Sydney in the northern section, the Round Mountain and Sydney. This gating line was the cutoff for the northern radar. So the northern radar, right, wouldn't display any returns below this. And what I mean by that is, if MDX went down here, okay, and could only be seen, even if it could only be seen by the Round Mountain radar, it would filter it out and not show it. It's really important. Okay, this took a couple of years to find. I knew there was some logic with it, but to find it was really difficult. What we've found now is that we've done some radio propagation surveys. Okay? They're not completely conclusive. Basically looking whether we could interrogate, whether Sydney radar could interrogate MDX in this area, and it's unlikely that it could. So the Sydney radar could not see MDX. However, the Round Mountain could. And the interesting thing is that even though it could and this one couldn't, if MDX went below this line, it was a very sharp line, it wouldn't display. That's really important because you can see where the position of the line is. We know that it was visible, not all the time, but it was predominantly visible on radar. That means it had to be above that line. That's a massive supporter, in particular of this fix here with the triangle. Okay, there's been a lot of debate about that. Because as that fix was set, it said it was at 320 at 45, which is actually here, slightly below the line. And we've always said it's actually more like 323 to 325, which is here. And so the gating line actually supports that as well. So these little snippets, it's just been a continual process of finding new ways that other people haven't looked at it, and new views, you know, and taking a different approach. And I think we're actually getting somewhere. So it's helping us massively, but is it giving it the position down to a pin head? No, it never will. But we've made massive advances in understanding roughly where the aircraft is, and that's very important, okay, when it comes to resource application for Landsat. So you can see that, okay, that's relatively small on the radar screen, close, the movement would have been very slow, okay. Now I'll put it to you over a topo map. Okay. So when you see other researchers trying to plot positions of MDX and again it was exactly here, and it's absolute rubbish. Okay, this really puts it all into perspective. Those symbol sizes are massive. Okay, you can see that the initial fix alone takes up so much room, and then from there, this 320 at 45 fix, look at it. Covers all that area, and all I need to be, I'm plotting that exactly where we think it is, but it could have been a little bit further in any direction. And so we're talking about significant areas, and like we said, it's about 5 nautical miles for the circle.
So that's the margin of error, like the aircraft's not the centre of that circle. It could be anywhere within that.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really quite vague.
It is quite vague. We can't really lie to ourselves about that, and that's the thing. If you pretty it up, you're really leading down the wrong path. Just to go back, what we do know is, for instance, debriefing the controllers. We know that when it was identified, it was between this Tamworth arc, this track here, Mount Sandon Singleton track, and I think that's the 120-mile arc from Sydney. So there's little key things they remember that was definitely boxed in. We go, okay, it was boxed in, so you know that's there. But when you start floating off in the middle here, the reference points are gone. okay, or not gone, but they're less usable, okay. You can see it's floating. How do you determine whether that's exactly 320 or 325? It's impossible. So I hope that puts puts everything into perspective. Yeah. So this is what we're dealing with, okay? This is what we're dealing with. And you can see we're operating in this Gloucester Tops area now. And this is one of the definitions of the Sydney final radar fix, okay, from ATC. And that's the one we believe is the most accurate, okay? But you can see that it takes up a big area, okay? This is another one which doesn't really fit the bill, but I thought I'd just throw it in there anyway for reference. So, you know, we will never know the exact position of fade, but we're getting better at determining the general area of it, okay, using different techniques that other people haven't used. Like I said, the gating line was one of them. The radio propagation software is the other. That's been massive. Okay, so we can look at the screen heights, look at the radar screen heights at different locations, and then we can look at the transcripts and say, well, he said 6.5 here, and then we can predict, but it's only prediction. Okay, it's only a general area, and like I said, we'll go into it now. Actually, radar fade. It probably, and I should put probably, faded from radar about 1,800 to 4,500 feet above ground level. So say he was at even in between that, somewhere at 2,500, 3,000 feet. Can you imagine now, he's gone off radar, but where did he go after that? There's so many options. Okay. So now we've got a very diluted radar position, but now we've got a lot of options after that on top of that. So very broad, very broad, okay. And I guess that statement says it all, okay. Aircraft could have flown on somewhat, or could have fallen vertically below, any options, and this will give you a bit of a heads up. Final radar circle, okay, we're operating in here this time round, but the reality is, could have gone that way to Scattered Top, could have gone back up the upper Kerripit, could have gone down in Whispering Gully, could have gone further this way, that way, you name it. There's just so many options. It's effectively impossible, unless you have witness sightings, okay, which we don't have any reliable ones, to determine whether it's more down here or over there. Okay? And again, this will give you some idea. There are some possible directions it could have gone in. Could have gone that way, could have gone that way, right? So I think that really sums it up, doesn't it? Yeah? That way too.
So the icing causes them to lose altitude. Is that the predominant effect of icing?
Icing, the biggest effect of icing is destroying the good characteristics of aerofoils, of wings. Remembering that it's not only the wings that have an aerofoil section, the propellers have an aerofoil section too. And if they get ice on them, they will become inefficient as well, so you've got less power. Then you've got less aerodynamic efficiency on the wings going down. Then you've got extra weight. Not the biggest thing, but you're going down. And then if you slow your speed down, you've got a problem, because now you've got a modified shape. Okay? Modified shape means you're a test pilot. No one's ever tested that aircraft before. Okay? With that icing that you have, you're flying some new beast that was never created before. And the issue is you have to keep your speed up. But to keep your speed up, you need to push the nose down, so you go down faster. So you don't want to do that. You generally slow down, bleed it off as much as you can. Unfortunately, with icing, you do get with these adverse aerodynamic characteristics. You tend to get one wing stall before the other, so it flicks. Big problem. So a lot of instances of aircraft slowing down, flicking over. Okay. I know several people that have done that. One of them was just a great story, but he was going over the snowies and in a Cessna 210, and he slowed down to about 110 knots, as I've said before, and it flicked upside down, and he went, oh. And luckily he was out of cloud, daylight. He'd accumulated the ice and he was out of the cloud at that stage. But that was at 110 knots, so you know, that's an easy speed to get down to in one of these. And I guess at night time it's you know, very difficult to recover. So yeah, icing causes this, and like I said, I know at least 2 guys that have actually iced up over the Barrington Top specifically. They both went east. They said the icing accumulation was very quick, took seconds to get significant icing, and then they had no ability to hold altitude, and they're exactly in the same situation as this guy. And they headed east, and one of them was lucky, started breaking off as they descended, and the other guy, I can't recall, I think he was in more trouble, but he happened to descend with the terrain, so to speak. So he was very low, but he was over the flatter areas to the east, so just lucky, yeah, sometimes it's luck. In relation to our most probable area, which is the blue ovally shaped thing there, that's what we're searching in here. Our most so you probably haven't seen our multiple area approach. We're not really going to go into detail. We've got 3 areas, and the reason why we've set it up that way is because most people just pick one area and go, that's where it's at. Okay, you can't think like that with this. Well, I don't think you can. So we have 3 areas. We've used different parameters, and we're treating it a little bit more with a risk-based approach. So we have very wide parameters in speed, like really high speeds, really broad radar fixes, just to account for the worst possible situation. And we have a boundary, and it's quite big, it's massive. And then we have the MLE, which is this Acquarie type 1 here. And that's probably one of our best indicators of our working environment, where we're really interested in. And the reason why it's that shape is because we've used realistic speeds, okay, realistic radar, what we think are realistic radar fixes, tolerances, and so forth, and realistic winds, okay, most likely parameters. That's why it's called the most likely extent. So you can see it's quite big, and it's 644 square kilometres, okay. But you can see that there is a lot of farmland and so forth there, and if you cut all that out, it's about 455. Still quite large, yeah, quite large. Then we can look at it in many different ways. We know the final radar track, so we can generally assume he's going to be somewhere near that. He might not be on it, but he might be somewhere near it. So we can cut a lot of that out, but we still in the back of our minds go, could be down here. You know, we must keep an open mind about it. But we're hovering around this area because that's where all the information and parameters and the radio propagation is leading us to. Okay. Next year we might look at it again and go, hang on a minute. But the reality is, it will more than likely be in that D somewhere. Okay. All right. And you can see you can cut out a lot of the farmland and so forth. Big area, and even when you cut it down to a most probable area, which is this section in here, is still quite large. Okay.
How much of that area do you have LiDAR maps of?
Pretty much all of it. Pretty much all of it. Yeah, lucky. This area out here, sparsely covered, but luckily where we are, just luck. So we will, you know, obviously continue on with our foot searching, and we're always amending our techniques and trying to become more efficient. But we're also looking into remote sensing. So LiDAR is our first step, and as I said, you know, at this stage the outcome has been more to generate excellent topographic maps, which is really good. But from a remote sensing point of view, to detect the aircraft, too many false positives. But we'll keep developing it. We'll muck around with the parameters in the software and see if we can make it better. And we're obviously interested in engaging anyone else who wants to try their technology, but it's costly. Yeah, but we'll keep looking, we'll keep trying it out. What have we done so far? So this hasn't been finished, it's only the beginning. The GNSS search tracks are in the red lines there, you can see. The red areas are actually traditional areas that were searched before there was GNSS available, and so we can only be very general about what was happening there. Okay. there are many more areas that were searched. Okay, we are slowly uploading. It will take us a while. Okay, it will take us some while to upload everything. Okay, there's a lot of information. A lot of it needs to be verified too. We don't want to put up information that's rubbish. Okay. The yellow areas are the fixes, the radar fixes. They're just drawn in a more, the reason why they're funny shapes, they're drawn in probability type shapes, okay? This is, for instance, this is the gating line cutting out most of that fix, because we know it couldn't have been south of the gating line. That's our definition of the most likely final fix from Sydney. So you can see it's clipped and funny. Okay, it's got all the parameters in there that we think are most probable. That's that funny one, the funny fix that we're not too confident with out to the east. But you can see there was actually there's a lot more red areas in here. In fact, the whole valley, or it wouldn't have been searched, not the whole valley, but they would have had a crack at most of it. So this area here, heavy searching, down here as well. And there's also bits and pieces out here that we need to plot in. Okay, so there's quite a fair bit. But now you can see, since I've been involved, we're hitting this general area out here quite hard, and we'll continue attacking it. Like I said, next year, when we move away from the bushfire area, we'll go back to reconnaissance type tactics, contour searching, and you'll see it spread quite a fair bit. Some areas we're avoiding because we know that there has been other private searches in the area, and we're attempting to gain their search tracks, search maps, but at this stage we're the only people that have really released en masse our search tracks. It's a bit of a, unfortunately, it's a bit of a you know, gold mining exercise, which is just a bit ridiculous. Okay, we just want to find the aircraft, and we're doing our best to do that, and we're releasing the information because we think it's all a bit of a kiddie game, keeping all this stuff to yourself, and you won't find it. There is so much area there to cover. It's ridiculous to even think that, you know, 5 people or 2 people can. You know, I mean, there's always a chance, isn't there, that you could come across it, but given the radar information, no. So that is available on that website there, VH-MDX, and in fact all our research papers and everything on there. So you could really get stuck in there for weeks. So just be careful. We're updating the map, as I said. We'll also have a whole bunch of new research papers out. We just haven't had the time. We're focused on operations at the moment, so we've basically had a year of not updating the papers, and they're in desperate need of updating. We have a hell of a lot more information and more findings, but we'll do that after the SAREX. And I guess it's a place where we can get a bit of exposure, and we've had great successes from the website for people coming forward with information that's been excellent. Yep. I'll leave it at that. Any questions?
Glenn, what's that?
Well, it looks like a nose cone off a Piper Chieftain aircraft.
It does.
And a engine cowling.
Yeah.
I took the photo.
So somebody found it, it's the wrong colour.
No. What do you think? You think it might be out there for you on the weekend?
Yeah, I think you're planting it.
It was hard work too. We were falling over a lot.
We're not putting that in my Land Cruiser.
So keep a look out there, Phil seems. Any questions at all with research or SAREX or anything?
When I was reading the notes you sent out, first of all, I thought it was a theoretical exercise. So it says here, it's likely that at least one wing is substantially retained form but separated from the fuselage, etc. So is that basically just based on similar incidents on a similar plane?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. Because how the hell would they know?
It's highly likely that the aircraft departed flight. It's highly like what I mean by that is it didn't. It's more likely that it's lost control and crashed rather than just sort of skimming into a mountain or anything like that. Either way, I guess you're going to have significant damage. But I would say there's a greater chance that you have a wing separated from it. And the reason why we mention that is that a lot of people say that aircrafts crash and it'll just be as big as the water bottle, and that's not the case at all. Not at all. If you look at aircraft crashes of that size, or any size really, but let's say you take the same aircraft or a similar sized aircraft in a similar circumstance, there's significant pieces left over. And a lot of people think that it's all crushed up, but you'll generally find a wing that's still in substantially complete form, so it'll get ripped off. It's the weakest point as it's coming through, big trees and so forth. Sometimes it doesn't. They don't separate. I mean, there was a crash that we surveyed 2 crashes in the 2 wrecks in the Barrington Tops. One of them was still substantially intact to this day, but that's because the pilot broke cloud. It was daytime, and he noticed a very small clearing, and he's attempted to put it in there. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so the aircraft still has its wings attached, everything attached. Actually, it looks quite good. However, the other one was in cloud, and it didn't lose control. It was obvious that it actually just hit the mountain, sort of met the mountain range. And to this day, it happened in 56 or 57, to this day you will see a swathe of hardwood trees still cut. You can see where it's gone in. There's regrowth underneath, but you do see the lane, the swathe, that it's still there from 56. It's amazing. But this one, I don't think is either of those two.
Yeah, flipped and just straight down.
One way or the other, heavy impact, and what I'm trying to emphasise there is that it won't be necessarily like that. It's unlikely to be like that. There will be substantial pieces still there. Like I said, at least one wing, I think we will find that it will be reasonably in reasonably original form. Obviously bent and all that sort of stuff, but it's not going to be concertina. It'll still be there.
Well, I was at Canangra Boy about a month ago, and one of the objective was to re-find a crashed plane, and we did. But wow, if you didn't know where it was, I just cannot imagine how you would find it. And it was down, 200 metres down from a ridge. But as you say, it was the fuselage and one of the wings was substantially intact. And when you look at the trees around it, and it was 40 years ago or something, you just had no idea how that could.
This has probably come in fairly vertically. Yeah. And that's the thing, people say, oh, you've got to look for canopy damage and that. And well, if it's gone in, substantially vertically or close to, it'll just penetrate the canopy, and it won't. It'll just, limited damage and not even noticeable. So, yeah, you've seen it, So the main thing is we've got to look for small wreckage. We've got to look for big wreckage. But there will be something big there. Even if the bushfire's gone through, I'm confident that at least you got the stainless steel firewall, the engine itself won't melt, okay? And even the aluminium, a lot of it will survive. So there will be wreckage. There's no doubt about that. Any more for any more?
Okay.
Yeah.
We think it was roughly flying on a west-east track, maybe slightly north of east, but that was the last radar track we had. And if you look at the Gloucester and the Kerripet, they're rivers flowing to the east with substantial ridges running approximately north-south. It's coming down. Is it more likely to have flown into a ridge head-on, or would the updraft going over the ridge take it over, and then the downdraft make it crash over the lip?
Yeah, who knows? That's I know. It's all speculation, But one thing I will say is that the whole concept of an updraft taking it over, I think that's highly unlikely. But if you notice, we don't search on it was coming this way, and if you notice, we search on the lee side of the ridge lines as well, because what's to say he's come in this way? I mean, he could have gone over and spiraled in and come back the other way. In fact, it's funny how many, another thing we've been trying to look at is how many aircraft accidents, where do they get found relative to their last radar position, and it's just incredible where they end up. That one, MJA, was a classic. You know, last radar position here, and ended up being somewhere totally, I mean, you could see it was within range, but not the direction that the aircraft was originally going or radar observed. And that's because another aircraft that was above the cloud was directing him to go to the east, so he decided, oh, it looks better to the east, all right, I'll turn. He didn't tell anyone that. Okay, the accident aircraft did not say that. And then ended up somewhere completely different. Luckily, he went for this patch. I mean, it didn't work out for him, but for the rescue services, luckily he went for this patch because they found him pretty much straight away. I think it was the next day, or might have even been on the day. Anyway, the next day at the latest. Just another point on that though. So that was one of the rare ones that was found relatively quickly, and that was because the pilot broke visual and was able to see a clearing and then attempt a landing on it. So he's in a clearing. Pretty much all the other accidents there, they were not found straight away. So there's a Mackie that went in, and it was found 9 years later. Okay. I've talked to one of the pilots involved. I just talked to one of the helicopter rescue helicopter pilots from the NSCA that was there. And they were lucky, the pilots, in that they ejected and one ended up in a campground. Well, he landed on a pile of logs and stuffed his back. I think the ejection substantially did that as well. The other guy was stuck in a tree for several hours, okay, coming out of winter, and he almost succumbed to hypothermia. Okay, they couldn't get him out. He didn't have a tree escape device, but that's another story. Anyway, it's a long story. But the point is that they seen the aircraft. They didn't think it was wasn't much further from where they ejected. They could see it disappear in the cloud and nose over. And it took 9 years to find. Okay. 9 years, bushwalkers found it. And guess how far from the main Scone Road, the Scone Road that runs through Devil's Triangle and so forth? It's 300 metres from the road. Okay. Interestingly enough, we just had someone contact us on the MDX website who was saying he probably found MDX. And when he told me the colour of the panelling, it was orange and yellow, white. And when he told me the location, and I tried leading him off the location on purpose to see where he'd go, it was the Mackie he found. The funny thing was he found it 2 months after the accident, reported it to police, and nothing happened. And it was found 9 years later.
Wow.
So it's funny, what you learn from, MDX without involving MDX, isn't it? So he had the key piece, he reported it. It was followed up, but obviously not enough. So it was, didn't result in a fine, which could have been done there and then, 2 months after, but no. But see, he went out for a pee. Okay. Just off the road. 300 metres from the road.
300 metres off the road.
So sometimes even when the wreckage does end up somewhere in a detectable location, you'll find that people just don't think twice. And that's why when we think about the wreckage flow downhill, and it might end up in a river, it means very little to people. And that's why we've tried educating the locals. So now we're getting, every now and again, we'll get a report saying, oh, I've just fished this out of the river because it looks sus. And that's great. But we're trying to, empower them to make some decisions and secure things that they find as well. Very important. There was a Mirage that went in. It was only 150 to 200 metres from the road. Admittedly, it was downhill from the road. That wasn't found for a year and a bit, and the only reason it was found, it was, again, intensive air search involved. Didn't see a thing. Farmer, basically the guy ejected, and he went down this mountain because it was at night time, he seen a homestead, so he walked in, said g'day, and it was funny talking to him. But the point is that this farmer then, after the aircraft was not found, the farmer kept walking up on a whatever weekly, fortnightly basis, just looking for it. Okay, it took him a year and a bit, and he found it. Okay, but helicopter searches, all that, nothing. Okay. and that was only, as I said, admittedly that one was downhill from the road, but it was only 150 to 200 metres. And do you see what I'm saying, where transport can come in handy with live searches? And that's why I'm saying we need to take a more in-depth look about what transport's role is in BSA. It's not just simply driving people out there. Okay, you know, you might see a piece of wreckage or a hand or whatever, you know, in the bush. So that's that. And the 1950s crash with the Hudson was a year and a half, possibly. It was in a clearing. No one's seen it. That was the biggest air search in Australia at that time. So, and that was how far, Phil? Phil and I rediscovered 50 metres, 100 metres maximum off the road. 100 metres. Okay. So, yeah.
Yes, I was thinking
The
they're
one
on a hill.
we walked on it, you know, and we went, oh, ding ding with the poles, and went, oh, there it is. So it's when people say, why do you bother searching that close to the road? Well, you see what? Just thought I'd throw that in there, something to think about.
This was some of the worst vegetation is too, because it run off from the road.
It's the worst, yeah. Once you punch through that vegetation layer next to the road, 50 metres maybe, beautiful, generally. Then every now and again you do get, you know, bad stuff. I mean, this is good, I shouldn't point it.
That was the one.
Yeah, that's as open as it gets. That's just unbelievably open. Okay. So, but yeah, you're right.
Would the LiDAR map pick that up clearly?
It would if the LiDAR did a run over it. Probably.
So what's the LiDAR map said about the Hudson, for example? Bits and pieces of that.
Not much, because the Hudson, as you know, substantially, there's nothing left of it. It's just a flap here and there, and so it didn't pick up anything really good.
That's been souvenir, of course.
It has, yeah. I think something like this would, like the cowling would actually, but it may not either. We're trying to baseline all this. It's very difficult. So the Hudson was nothing, and we don't have coverage for the other crash. So yeah, but we've looked at other metal objects. It's hit and miss. For instance, there's a dunny roof that it doesn't pick up at the campground. Just doesn't. But then again, it picks up other bits and pieces, camp kitchen and things like that. It is a bit hit and miss, but we'll develop it. We'll muck around with it. All right. Any more for any more? All full bottle, ready to get out there and
Very fun, yeah. Thanks, that was really good.
You will have fun out there. We're always making fun exercise, and like I said, it'll be, you know, nice and busy as well. So you know, you'll learn a lot and have a lot of fun. But yeah, hopefully we'll be able to have a fire. I didn't mention that there's a total fire ban today up there, but tomorrow it's easing, and with the forecast, I think we'll find that it won't exist. So hopefully we'll have a campfire. So come around and everyone can tell their stories and be silly.
The wood there,